As we all know, Disney is a paragon of clean, wholesome, family-friendly entertainment without the slightest foray into any form of adult content. And if you believe that, we have this nice bridge we'd like to sell you. It seems that not even the squeaky-clean mouse is above sneaking in a few dirty jokes here and there for the parents, hiding them in plain sight right under their target audience's noses. But which of these adult jokes are just as immature as the kids watching them, and which cross the line? Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Binge, and this is Disney Movie Adult Jokes, Dirty to Dirtiest. Before we begin, let's start with a few rules and disclaimers. Obviously, we're going to be talking about some pretty adult stuff here, and while we're going to try to approach this with some level of tact, we can't sugarcoat everything. We're only going to be covering original Disney movies, meaning we won't be talking about Pixar or any other third parties, or any sequels to any of these movies. But let us know in the comments if you'd like us to do those as well. Finally, we're only going to be talking about one entry per movie, because if we were to go over every adult joke in a Disney movie, I'd be recording all week. With that out of the way, let's get into our ranking, starting with the cleanest. These are the jokes that are sort of adult, but are mainly immature jokes that would just as easily appeal to Disney's target audience. The cleanest joke on our list has to go to Abby and RUNT'S karaoke performance from Chicken Little. After Chicken Little gets hit with the falling piece of the sky a second time, he calls his friends for help. As he does so, they do some karaoke, where Abby and Runt are singing a cover version of the Spice Girls' debut song, Wannabe. While this song is very sexual, we have to place it on the bottom of our list because by the time the film came out, Wannabe was already a radio hit for almost a decade. It's one of the most recognizable songs of the generation and has been played on multiple radio stations since then, even some that were aimed at children. Even if the film's target audience understood the reference or were able to pick up on the song's meaning in the lyrics, they would have been desensitized to it due to the song being everywhere. Our second least dirty joke goes to Frog's Bar from Meet the Robinsons. Shortly before Goob uses the mini Doris to mind control one of Franny's frogs, the frogs hang out in a tiny bar that the amphibians have created and run themselves. While the bar seems to be serving flies instead of alcohol, Frankie conflates the issue by claiming that he gets a good buzz from eating the insects. While this is obviously just a cheap pun, it's a pun that only the adults in the audience are likely to get, meaning it makes our list, if at a low spot. Next up, we had the Royal Bard from Sleeping Beauty. If a fake drunk can make our list, then an actual one would have to rank slightly higher. A throwaway gag character, the Bard was a raging alcoholic during an informal meeting between King Stefan and Hubert, sneaking wine through his guitar hole and hiding under the table until he eventually drinks himself unconscious. While it is implied that the Bard has never been drunk before, or at least not this drunk, the fact remains that this little stunt leaves the Bard as a character who spends more time asleep than the Sleeping Beauty. He only comes out of his drunken stupor after Maleficent's curse is fulfilled, and is only awake for a moment before Merryweather puts him right back to sleep. Honestly, what a raw deal. In a similar vein, our next entry goes to the infamous pink elephant scene from Dumbo. We're sure that we don't need to describe this, but we will say that the cause of this head trip once again comes down to the most accurate three-word description of history: alcohol was involved. While some have raised the specter of LSD or other psychedelic drugs, we have to debunk that theory due to the pun, as the phrase "seeing pink elephants" is a specific phrase used to describe being so blackout drunk as to start hallucinating. While the phrase was outdated even by the time the movie came out, it was still common enough to warrant making this reference to begin with. Next is Bolt learning how to be a dog. After Bolt comes to terms with his identity crisis, Mittens decides to teach him how to be a real dog. One of these lessons included showing him a toilet and explaining that dogs are supposed to drink from it. Bolt responds to this about as well as any of us would if we were able to drink out of a toilet.
Out of this? But...
Because this is a short throwaway gag, we have to place it low on our list. Our next entry goes to the Seagull from Peter Pan. When Smee's getting ready to shave Hook's face, he places a towel on the captain's head. While his back is turned, a passing seagull decides to make a nest out of the towel, taking the place of Hook's head. Smee then absent-mindedly begins shaving the seagull's tail, exposing the bird's butt, and it flies off in embarrassment. While a seagull's bare bottom doesn't seem that risque, it is, thankfully, the most adult thing in the movie about the eternal child, so it gets a low spot on this list. Moving on, we have Prince Ahmed's horse from Aladdin. When we're first introduced to this suitor for Jasmine's affections, he shows himself to not be the ideal husband by assaulting children on the street. Thankfully, Aladdin saves the day. However, Ahmed proves himself to be even more irredeemable, kicking Aladdin into the mud. Al then calls them as he sees them, commenting how he's never seen a horse with 2 rear ends before, with Ahmed being the second rear end.
It's not every day you see a horse with 2 rear ends.
While we give props for saying what the audience is thinking, it's still tame compared to some of our later entrants, thus it's low ranking. Next is the expedition from Atlantis, the Lost Empire. There's a lot going on in this section of the movie, but let's run through a few examples. While Mrs. Packard is going through the announcements, she mentions that tonight's dinner will be baked beans with a musical performance afterwards.
Attention, tonight's supper will be baked beans.
Alluding to the crew's farting. In that same announcement, she mentions that someone stole the letter L from the motor pool sign. Later, when setting up a camp for the night, Packard mentions that she sleeps nude, to which Dr. Sweet hands out sleep masks as she's prone to sleepwalking. We could go on, however, they're all the same level of immature, meaning this section gets a low spot despite the sheer volume of the jokes involved. Next, we have Yellow Snow from Brother Bear. At one point in the movie, when Koda is teaching Kanai how to survive as a bear, he tells him about what kind of snow is safe to eat. He mentions how yellow and green snow is unclean, but also adds that he had to learn this the hard way. The implication is that Koda had eaten yellow snow before, which, if you've never seen any winter-themed movie before, is the kind which has been urinated on. While this is a staple of snowy movies and shows, it's still an immature joke, hence this being in this category. Our next entry takes us back to Nottingham with a badminton scene from Robin Hood. Maid Marian is playing a game of badminton with her lady-in-waiting, Lady Cluck, during which the shuttlecock falls into Lady Cluck's cleavage. Lady Cluck begins frantically reaching in to get it out before it falls out of her dress. While this could be taken as a sexual reference, especially if you take the name of the object into account, it's a low form of humor which is neither clever nor excessive, placing it on the upper end of this category. Next is a scene from Big Hero 6 with Baymax's diagnosis. When Hero is showing signs of mood swings, Baymax diagnoses him as going through puberty. He also explains that Hero can expect to have an increase in body hair, particularly in and around the face, chest, armpits, and a fourth area, which Hero cuts him off before he can finish.
You may also experience strange and powerful new urges.
Anyone who has ever gone through puberty will instantly recognize this as a reference to pubic hair, which easily explains Hero's embarrassment about the topic. While a very blatant example, it is still minor compared to some of our later entries, hence why we have it ranked here. Next is NOI'S diaper attack from Raya and the Last Dragon. Yes, another example of toilet humor. However, we had to rank this one slightly higher than the others, simply due to how in-your-face this one was, figuratively and literally. When Raya is chasing after Noi and the Angus as a diversion, Noi takes off her diaper and throws it at her, during which point her bare bottom is seen for a short period of time before the Angus place a new one on her. Because of the large amount of focus this moment gets, we have to place it higher than the previous toilet jokes.
Look how close my butt is to my head.
Next is not just a joke, but an entire character, Uncle Waldo from the Aristocats. While not a habitual drunk like the Bard, Uncle Waldo ranks higher simply due to the sheer level of drunkenness he displays in the movie. When Abigail and Amelia introduce the cats to their uncle, they discover he had just escaped from a nearby restaurant that was trying to cook him by basting him in white wine. This leaves the poor goose in a highly inebriated state, resulting in him getting very loud and obnoxious. What places him this high is his interactions with his nieces, as when they try to take him away, he's implied to be doing something to them as they stagger away, eliciting a flurry of embarrassed giggling from the girls in question. It could just as easily be him harassing his nieces, earning him a slightly higher spot. Hey, more toilet humor. Next is Maui's warm ocean current from Moana. After defeating the Kakamora, Moana asks Maui to teach her how to sail. When he's forced to do so due to the ocean hitting him with a poisoned dart, he tells her to look for a warm current to see if she's going the right way. When she sticks her hand into the water downstream of him, she notices the water is cold, but starts to get warmer. She then notices a relieved look on Maui's face and deduces that he had urinated in the water and was messing with her to begin with. Much like with Noi, this was a very explicit scene, but we can't rank it any higher due to the lowbrow humor associated with it. Finally, for this section, we come to Orwen and Fluter from the Black Cauldron. Out of all the witches of Morva, Orwen is the most eccentric. She immediately takes a liking to Fluter, attempting to seduce him with her body, which, yeah. The joke comes when Fluter is turned into a frog by Orgok while Orwen is holding him, causing him to fall into her cleavage, struggling to get out. What places this above the shuttlecock joke from Robin Hood is that Fluter is a living person, making his getting stuck between Orwen's breast a more sexual act.
Oh, pull yourself together, madam.
It is still the same joke as before, so we can't rank it higher, but that added raunchiness earns it the top spot of this section. Now that's out of the way, let's move on to our next section. We're now getting to the more risque and suggestive end of our list. These are the naughty jokes. Starting this section, we have Gus's tail beads from Cinderella. When Jacques and Gus are tasked with collecting materials to make Cinderella's ball gown, they come across the loose beads that were rejected by Drizella. In an attempt to carry as many beads as possible, Jacques begins threading them through Gus's tail, with Gus wincing as more beads are added until his entire tail is filled with them, resembling a certain adult toy. This would normally earn this a higher ranking if this came out today. However, this is a reference that only really made sense as time went on. While the aforementioned toy has its roots as far back as ancient China, what we now recognize as said toy wasn't widely recognized, let alone patented, until the late 90s, well after this movie came out. Since this scene is just a happy accident, we have to place this at the bottom of this section. Next is Jiminy's Pebble from Pinocchio. While searching for Geppetto, Pinocchio and Jiminy head to the bottom of the ocean. When they learn that he was swallowed by the whale, Monstro, Pinocchio is able to ballast himself by tying a rock to his newly acquired tail, but Jiminy has no such tail to tie a weight to. Instead, he's forced to put a pebble down the front of his pants, appearing, shall we say, rather endowed in that area. He's even shown being stared at by a curious female fish as he does so, and he comments on the lack of privacy given to him during this operation.
No more privacy than a goldfish.
While this doesn't get called to attention for long, it still lands this moment squarely in the naughty category. Next up, we have the Dirty Magazine from 101 Dalmatians. This is one of those blink and you'll miss it moments. At the beginning of the movie, Pongo's looking through Roger's old magazines before stumbling across one which features a sultry woman in a very revealing dress on the cover. This is suggested to be a porn magazine, a la Playboy. However, we can't say for sure since Pongo's only comment about the magazine is that dogs are poor judges of human beauty. Because of the limited screen time and general ambiguity, we can't rank it higher, but since the possibilities still exist, we can't rank it any lower either. Our next joke, or rather character, is Shorty from Tangled. Another character who appears to be wildly drunk at all times. We're placing him in the naughty category, mainly for his interactions with Mother Gothel. When Shorty meets Gothel, he immediately starts hitting on her in a very sexual manner. His first comment calling her a tall drink of water. If you're not getting the reference, then you are SOL, since we're not explaining this one. Combined with the fact that Shorty is constantly drunk and that Gothel is Gothel, we have to place him here on the list. Once again, we have to rank an entire character. This time, it's MUSHU from Mulan. There's actually a lot of adult jokes in Mulan, and almost all of them can be traced back to MUSHU. And with a character voiced by Eddie Murphy in a movie about a cross-dressing warrior, what else did you expect? In one scene, MUSHU mentions how he can see through Mulan's armor, earning himself a slap to the face for the comment. In another, during an argument with Yao, MUSHU calls him a lip noodle, making a comment about the man's manhood.
Chicken boy, say that to my face, you limp noodle!
Then there's the issue of the bathing scene, where MUSHU outdoes himself in adult humor, from mentioning there being a couple of things that the men are bound to notice about Mulan, to him literally biting Ling on the butt to prevent him from revealing Mulan, and so on and so forth. Due to the volume of these incidents, we have to rank MUSHU high, but despite the wide umbrella he cast, the severity of his remarks are still comparatively tame, so we can't rank them any higher either. Since we're keeping a theme of ranking entire characters, let's add one more, with Doppler from Treasure Planet. Unlike our previous two, Doppler isn't the source of the dirty jokes in his movie, but rather the subject. He serves as the butt of the joke, no pun intended, particularly in regard to his little Doppler. When Jim is taken home by the Robocops, they ask Doppler if he is his father, to which Sarah vehemently denies, even expressing disgust. Later, when John Silver is scanning Doppler's spacesuit with his cyborg eye, Doppler immediately covers his crotch, not wanting to be seen by the pirate. The joke Doppler makes was done by accident. When Captain Amelia thanks him for his astronomical advice, he then adds that he has a lot to offer anatomically, before correcting himself. While he doesn't quite match Mushu's volume of jokes, the explicitness of Doppler's jokes earns him a higher ranking. Now it's time to go back to individual scenes, with Esmeralda and Phoebus in Notre Dame from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Honestly, we could have just said this whole movie and called it good, but we felt that you deserved a little more nuance than that. Nevertheless, in a movie filled with genital trauma, this scene comes out on top due to the pun involved. While fighting Esmeralda in the cathedral, Phoebus makes a comment about her hitting below the belt. Esmeralda then decides to show him just what hitting below the belt looks like, to which Phoebus can only respond with a hearty touche. As an added bonus, there is one point where Esmeralda calls Phoebus a sneaky son of a before he cuts her off to remind her that they're in a church. We felt that these two things combined make this the dirtiest scene in an already dirty kids movie, placing it in the dead center of our list.
Easy, easy. I just shaved this morning.
Next is Flower being Twitter-pated in Bambi. When friend Owl warns Bambi and his friends about being Twitter-pated, aka falling in love, they resolve to avoid it happening to them at all cost. Of course, this resolve only lasts a few minutes, as each of them finds a mate almost immediately. In Flower's case, he meets a young skunk named Bluebell, who takes to him just as quickly as he does to her. When she kisses him, Flower reacts by having his body become flushed with blood while also becoming as stiff as a board. Anyone even remotely familiar with the male anatomy will instantly see the resemblance to a certain body part that behaves in a similar manner when in similar situations. Because of this, we have to give this scene a higher ranking. Up next, we have Stitch harassing an old lady in Lilo and Stitch. During the montage of Lilo trying to teach Stitch how to be a model citizen like Elvis Presley, she points out an elderly woman in a hotel lobby, claiming that she looks like she could use some lovin'. She then instructs Stitch to give her a kiss, which we don't see on screen, but judging by how the woman reacts, it's heavily implied that Stitch touched her somewhere inappropriate. Since this scene is ambiguous, we can't rank it any higher, but we feel that the implications are strong enough to earn its ranking in this category. If you thought ranking an entire character was a bit much, how about an entire song? That's the case with He's a Tramp from Lady and the Tramp. When you have a character literally named Tramp, you know there's bound to be some suggestive themes. However, his introductory song outdoes all of them simply by it being a song. Disney songs tend to be the most memorable and recognized part of their movies, and when you look at this one, it's a wonder how this one made it past the censors. The song is basically one innuendo after another, with Peg singing about Tramp's many sexual conquests and promiscuous nature, while also sprinkling in a few other suggestive references, such as calling him a no-count pup. Considering this song's prominence and explicitness, we have to rank this at a high spot on the list. Next, we have an obscure reference with Kaa's sacroiliac from The Jungle Book. If you missed this joke as a kid, we forgive you. Even if you watched this recently, you might have easily missed it. After the snake's second encounter with Mowgli, Kaa slithers off with his tail in a knot while moaning about his sacroiliac.
My sacroiliac.
For those who are not anatomy buffs, the sacroiliac joints are the sections of the pelvis meant to protect the genitals from impact. Since snakes do not have pelvises, nor by extension sacroiliac joints, we can only assume that Kaa was referring to something else in the same general area. Considering how the camera focuses on the tied up tip of the tail and the potentially aroused way he moans this line, it's not hard to see why this scene ended up here on the list, even if it went over the heads of even the parents. Next is the We Love Jack scene from The Nightmare Before Christmas. Shortly after the This Is Halloween number, the residents of Halloween Town begin singing Jack's praises for how scary he was this year, during which one of the witches can be seen humping Jack's leg. Later in the same scene, Jack passes by a jazz band where one of the members refers to him as Bone Daddy.
Nice work, Bone Daddy.
Unlike with a witch, it's entirely possible that this was an accident. They could have let this line slip without thinking of the implications of the words Bone Daddy outside of the intended context. Still, for adding the phrase Bone Daddy to a children's movie, along with the witch from earlier, we had to rank this on a higher spot on our list. Up next, we have a classic joke with Judy's bunny multiplication joke from Zootopia. While blackmailing Nick with his felony tax evasion, she lets slip that she has over 270 siblings, saying that bunnies are good at multiplication. This is a near obligatory joke in any animated feature that includes rabbit characters. But in a movie like this, where the characters are anthropomorphized to the point of resembling humans, the sexualization of the reference is increased significantly. As an added bonus, in that same scene, there's an ad in the background depicting a bunny couple with numerous children, seemingly to advertise sterilization procedures. These factors combined work together to earn this staple joke a higher spot on our list. Our next entry encompasses not one, but two characters at once, Lumiere and Fifi from Beauty and the Beast. While far from the main focus of the film, it's clear that these two have some history. At one point, Fifi even tells Lumiere that she has been burnt by him before, obviously alluding to a past sexual affair. Throughout the film, all their interactions can be categorized as playful flirting, constantly teasing each other in an attempt to seduce one another. Because of this blatant flirting combined with implied sexual history, we have to place these two higher. Next is Naveen from The Princess and the Frog. Much like MUSHU, most of the adult humor in the early portion of this movie gets traced back to Naveen, and like our previous entries, this stems from his shameless flirting. From the moment he meets Tiana, Naveen tries to seduce her, from suggesting that she might beg for more than a kiss, to him being all over her when the kiss turns her into a frog as well.
Just one, unless you beg for more.
Later, when they're lost in the swamp, he seductively suggests that they get comfortable before she slaps him for his insolence. Then there's a matter of when the two of them get literally tongue-tied, to which Ray thinks they got a little carried away, suggesting that they might have been in the middle of getting comfortable. And these are just a few examples. Naveen's flirting is that prevalent. Because of that, he earns a higher spot on our list. Our next spot goes to Tarzan and Jane from Tarzan. Honestly, these two may be one of the thirstiest couples Disney has ever created, and that's no small feat considering our last few characters. When Tarzan first meets Jane, he tries to take a peek at what's under her skirt, only for her to kick him in the face for his efforts. While this could be chalked down to innocent curiosity, Jane's reaction, while completely justified, is what pushes this joke into the naughty category. Of course, Jane is no angel either. While she is describing Tarzan to her father and drawing him on the blackboard, her voice and expressions become increasingly intense. Professor Parker takes note of this and jokingly offers to leave her alone with the blackboard for a moment, prompting an embarrassing yet amused reaction from his daughter. For this reason, we have to place these two here. Taking a break from the thirsty characters, sorta, we next have Hans shoe size from Frozen. While Kristoff is questioning Anna about how well she knows her supposed fiancé, Hans, one of the questions he asks of her is about what his foot size is, to which she replies that foot size doesn't matter. This is a subtle reference to the popular myth that the size of a person's hands or feet can indicate the size of their genitalia. In that vein, Anna's response is also similar to the popular response that women often give when saying that the size of a man's genitalia doesn't matter, which, let's be honest, is also a bit of a myth. Nevertheless, this thinly veiled joke is blatant enough to earn itself a spot this high up on our list. Next is Snow White with the dwarves washing up for dinner. Yes, even Disney's oldest movie has adult humor dirty enough to end up this high on our list. When the dwarves are preparing to wash up for dinner, something which they have never done before, Bashful asks if doing so includes washing where it doesn't show, likely referring to their private parts.
You have to wash where it doesn't show?
What was Bashful expecting was going to happen? A young woman living with 7 men was already a bit risque for the time, so this line seems to add to the implications of the situation. Thus, we rank it here. Next up, we find Zangief's briefs and Wreck-It Ralph. While sorting through the items at the Lost and Found in Tapper, Ralph comes across a pair of briefs left by Zangief. Additionally, after stealing Markowski's armor, Ralph then uses said briefs to cover the unconscious soldier's privates before locking him up in the closet. Not only is this somewhat suggestive, but consider this as well. How did Zangief lose his briefs to begin with? Not only that, but consider how he generally wears nothing else. How did he get back to Street Fighter without them? Since this happened in Tapper, we can assume alcohol was involved, but the implications of what circumstances led to this moment earn this a high spot on the list. Next is the Oedipus reference from Hercules. Like with the Jungle Book, this is one of those things where you have to know what it is to get it. While on a date with Meg, Hercules remarks on the play they saw, which was evidently Oedipus Rex, adding that he thought he had problems until he saw it. Oedipus is a tragic hero of Greek mythology who, among other things, killed his father and married his mother, which, yeah, we can see that being problematic. You have to know the reference to get it, but the fact that they were able to slip this into a kid's movie is impressive. Oh, and as an additional bit of trivia, icing on the cake, it turns out that the correct pronunciation of Oedipus is actually supposed to be Oedipus. Nah, we're not kidding, nor will we say any more on the matter. Go ahead, make your jokes. And finally for this section, we have the sex scene from The Lion King. No, we're not talking about the part during Can You Feel the Love Tonight where Nala looks at Simba with her doomy eyes. Rather, we're referring to a scene shortly before that. When Simba is struggling with his lingering guilt, he flops down on a bed of flowers, kicking up a cloud of dust and petals in the process. However, if you pause the scene at just the right moment, you can see the dust appears to form the letters SEX for a split second. This resulted in several protests about the scene, with one conservative activist, Donald Wildman, claiming the image was a subliminal message intended to promote sexual promiscuity. So then why have we excluded this from our top category? It turns out that Disney has already gone on record saying that this was all a misunderstanding. According to animator Tom Saito, the letters were supposed to be SFX, which was meant to be an innocent signature by the special effects animation team, as that was a common abbreviation for their department. While this could be a cover-up for their mistake, it could just as easily be the mistake they claim. Therefore, this added ambiguity keeps it from gaining a higher spot. Besides, if they're really trying to promote sexual promiscuity, we feel that Nala's bedroom eyes got the job done. Finally, we get to our final category. These are the explicit, the raunchy, the X-rated jokes that would make even a sailor blush. We'd say that we're surprised that these jokes didn't cost their films their ratings, but, well, you'll see. Starting the section, we have the rat trap from The Great Mouse Detective. While searching for Ratigan's lair, Basil and Dawson come to this riverside bar looking for clues. The bartender slips a drug into their drinks, resulting in Dawson becoming wildly drunk, interrupting the act on stage, and triggering a massive bar fight. We're ranking this scene above the previous drunks for two reasons. For one thing, it wasn't the alcohol that caused Dawson's drunkenness, but the drug that the bartender administered without his knowledge, making this a more serious issue. However, the more important issue with the scene is that the act he interrupted was a burlesque striptease. Miss Kitty's act involved stripping down to a very revealing tight suit, while the bar's patrons grabbed fruitlessly at her. In fact, the musical number accompanying this, Let Me Be Good to You, is even more sexual, with one line in the song's climax saying how she'll take off all her blues, while dressed exclusively in blue. And if you recall, as we said with He's a Tramp, Disney songs are some of the more identifiable parts of a movie. With that in mind, this scene easily earned a spot in this section. Following that, we have our final characters, Tito and Georgette from Oliver and Company. Remember how we said Tarzan and Jane were one of the thirstiest couples Disney ever produced? Well, it turns out they have nothing on these two dogs. Upon first meeting, Tito is instantly smitten with Georgette, spending the rest of the movie trying to win her affections. At first, she's really not interested in him. However, after seeing how brave he was in trying to rescue Jenny, she comes around. And boy, she goes from 0 to 100 libido-wise. She starts coming on to him so hard that even Tito can't take it, and runs away from her to return to Fagin's gang, despite saying previously that he'd be staying with her. While it is implied that this was simply due to him not wanting to be bathed, the fact that he runs out wearing a sailor suit can't be ignored, so we're gonna place these two here regardless. Next is the voyeuristic cherub from Fantasia, proving you don't need dialogue to slip in adult jokes. During the Pastoral Symphony segment, the two lonely centaurs, Brutus and Melinda, are brought together, and the curtain closes on them to give them privacy for what's about to happen. If you don't know what that is, I can't help you. However, if there was any doubt, one of the cherubs peeks in on them through the curtain, with his flushed bare buttocks even forming the shape of a heart in the process. If you didn't know before, you definitely do now. Next is a well-known meme with Yzma's thigh knife from The Emperor's New Groove. We all know this one, so we'll keep the recap brief. When Yzma confronts Kuzco and Pacha in her lab, she starts lifting up her skirt, much to the others' horror, only to reveal a knife strapped to her thigh, eliciting a relieved sigh from everyone involved.
And I bet you weren't expecting this.
If you're somehow still wondering why this scene is ranked where it is, allow us to repeat ourselves. Yzma, a super centenarian, lifted up her skirt, and everyone was relieved when the object revealed was merely a deadly weapon. We rest our case. Next is Maggie's teats from Home on the Range. When we're first introduced to this buxom bovine, the camera focuses on her large udder, complete with teats. She then goes on to say, "Yeah, they're real, quit staring," making an obvious reference to breast implants. Funny enough, this isn't even the dirtiest joke in the movie, with the cattle drive and the saloon scenes being much better contenders. So why did we decide to go with this one? Simple, the single throwaway line in the beginning of the movie is the main reason why this film earned a PG rating. Honestly, there are probably other reasons, but this is the one that is always singled out. Thus, we have to place it near the top of our list. Next is Zinni's harem from the movie Dinosaur. No, we're not talking about the good dinosaur because that is obviously Pixar. We're talking about the early 2000s CGI film that's as forgotten by Disney as the rest of us. And looking at the dirty jokes that make up the bulk of the humor, perhaps that's for the best. There's a lot we could bring up, but let's look at one for now. Near the end of the movie, when the herd reaches the nesting ground, Zinni finds himself surrounded by several female lemurs who are all attracted to him. As they all crowd around him, he then suggests they all play a game of monkey in the middle. There's no way to sugarcoat this, so we're gonna say read the room if you don't understand. Our bronze medal of dirty has to go to Genie moving the earth and Aladdin and the King of Thieves. Alright, we originally said no sequels when making this list, but this one is so blatant, we had to make an exception. When the 40 thieves crash Aladdin and Jasmine's wedding with a stampeding elephant, the ground starts to shake, prompting Genie to exclaim, "I thought the earth wasn't supposed to move until the honeymoon." Again, there's no rosy way to say this, so we're just gonna say that the word of the day is consummation and leave it at that. If you're still curious, Google. For the silver medal, we have to go with the castle from The Little Mermaid. If you're wondering what this is about, that's understandable as this technically wasn't actually in the movie. When the film was first released on VHS, if you look closely at the golden castle in the background of the box art, you'll notice that one of the pillars looks a little phallic for a castle. According to Disney, this was the result of a rush job, with their quality control not being quick enough to catch this mistake before it was shipped out. Of course, that doesn't answer whether or not this was actually intentional, which is why we have to rank it higher than The Lion King's controversial SEX scene, but it's still not number one. That's right, our gold medal of dirty jokes goes to the topless woman from The Rescuers. During a scene where Miss Bianca and Bernard are flying through New York on Orville's back, if you look closely, you could have seen a picture of a real topless woman in a window in the background. Yes, the image was blurry and was only on screen for less than a tenth of a second, but it was still a case of real-life nudity in a Disney film. Emphasis on was, as on January 8, 1999, 3 days after the film's second home video release, Disney recalled all 3.4 million copies of the video and has since edited out the image in question for all future issues and screenings of the movie. Of course, because the internet is nothing if not aggressively pornographic, the image, and by extension this controversy, lives on. Because of this, the extensive cover-up, the lengths Disney went through for this cover-up, and of course the content itself, we have no choice but to rank this as the dirtiest joke in all of Disney's long list of dirty jokes. Alright guys, that's the list. What do you think? Let us know if you agree. Be sure to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons. But most importantly, stay wicked.